Welcome to NCVLI's Victims' Rights Issue Spotting video. This video will demonstrate how non-attorney professionals serving victims can identify potential victims' rights issues in their clients' experiences navigating the criminal justice system. We are going to review common victims' rights, discuss common risks to and violations of those rights, and provide participants an opportunity to practice identifying victims' rights issues in hypothetical case scenarios. This interactive video builds on the core concepts and Victims' Rights 101 videos. This video is for educational purposes only. The video and its content are not legal advice and cannot substitute for legal advice. The first step to identifying potential victims' rights issues is being able to identify what victims' rights exist in law in your jurisdiction. Although victims' rights vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, common victims' rights include the rights to privacy, to confer, to notice, to be present at critical proceedings, to be heard, to proceedings free from unreasonable delay or speedy disposition, to restitution, and to be treated with fairness, dignity, and respect. The second step is to know the definition of crime victim in your jurisdiction. This is critical because only a person who fits the legal definition of quote-unquote crime victim in your jurisdiction will be entitled to these rights. When you interact with a crime victim, what can you look for to help you identify issues that victim may be experiencing regarding these rights? It starts with knowing a bit more about the rights. A crime victim may experience issues early on in their interactions with the criminal justice system. The right to information is the right to advisement of the existence of crime victims' rights. This right requires system actors who have first contact, from law enforcement to the prosecutor, to provide information about victims' rights to the victim in a way that they can understand. Sometimes this is in the form of a brochure or a victims' rights card. The right to notice is a distinct right. This right is often referred to as the gateway right. The right to notice is at the heart of victims' participatory status, because if a victim is unaware of key moments in the case or proceedings in which those rights are implicated, the victim cannot participate in the system. This right may be implicated in situations where a victim is not timely notified of hearing dates or of the defendant's arrest or release. The language of the right to notice varies by jurisdiction. Like notice and information, the right to confer empowers crime victims to participate in the criminal justice system. The right to confer allows a victim both to gather and provide information about the crime to the prosecutor. This is not a right to control the prosecution, but it does require the prosecutor to hear the victim's concerns. A victim who is not afforded the opportunity to confer cannot meaningfully convey to the prosecutor or ultimately to the court their safety concerns, their hoped-for outcome regarding whether or how to charge the defendant, and what release conditions should be requested in a pretrial release proceeding. The right to confer is also critical to ensure any plea agreement meaningfully factors the victim's rights and interests. Navigating proceedings can be challenging for crime victims, and delays can make the entire process more difficult. Repeated continuances or rescheduled hearings can violate a victim's rights to proceedings free from unreasonable delay. While many jurisdictions have a general right for all crime victims to have proceedings involving their victimization be free from unreasonable delay, some also afford child victims and other vulnerable populations a specific right to a speedy trial in certain situations. We often consider the right to proceedings free from unreasonable delay When we hear the victims who are struggling to schedule time away from work or cope with ongoing stress about proceedings that suffer from delays. The right to protection relates to the victim's right to be reasonably protected from the accused or those acting on behalf of the accused throughout the criminal justice process. This broad right is complemented by other laws that address issues of the victim's physical safety and mental and emotional health. This right is at play whenever the court is considering release or contact conditions, and when information about the victim's identity or location might be presented in court proceedings. A victim's right to protection may be threatened if, for example, the accused is granted bail without certain conditions of release, or the court proceedings endanger the victim by making specific information accessible to the accused, such as contact information. The right to privacy refers to protections involving limiting or preventing access to the victim's personal information. Control over the release of personal information helps to protect victims from being re-victimized during criminal proceedings. This right is often implicated by subpoenas for medical or mental health records, discovery attempts, or the need to safeguard other information as it is appropriate. The right to be present gives the victim the authority to decide if they want to be in the courtroom during the criminal proceedings, whether pre-trial, at trial, or post-conviction, including sentencing, and even probation and parole hearings. Victims may experience challenges with this right if the court prevents them from being present for proceedings or fails to provide the accommodations necessary to be present in a meaningful way. The right to be heard is intended to ensure victims can be active participants in the criminal justice system. It refers to the right to make an oral and/or written statement to the court at a criminal justice proceeding. This right may be implicated if the court does not allow the victim an opportunity to be heard in release, plea, sentencing, parole, and any proceeding impacting a victim's right. One example of the right to be heard is when a victim gives a victim impact statement at sentencing. The right to restitution may help a victim recover from financial harm. Restitution is money paid from the offender to the victim for certain financial losses that the victim suffered as a result of the offender's crime. Depending upon the jurisdiction's statutory or constitutional provision, the right to restitution can be mandatory or discretionary and can entitle the victim to full or partial restitution. These financial losses can include medical bills, lost wages, and damaged or lost property. The right to restitution may be implicated if a prosecutor does not seek restitution at all, or seeks an amount less than the full amount of the victim's losses, or when a court refuses to consider and order restitution during sentencing or a separate restitution hearing. The rights to be treated with fairness, dignity, and respect are broad but meaningful rights. Some combination of these broad rights are found in many jurisdictions nationwide. The right to fairness is understood as a right to due process. More generally, however, these rights are implicated when the system demonstrates hostile treatment, which can include reference to the victim as quote-unquote the alleged victim, derogatory comments about a victim, or unreasonable denial of the presence of a support person to accompany the victim during proceedings, or even a refusal to timely return property to a victim in some instances. In addition to these rights, every state has something called crime victim compensation, or sometimes crime victim reparations. These programs are money paid from the government to a crime victim to reimburse the victim for certain losses incurred as a result of the crime. Recovery from these programs is typically capped at amounts less than a victim's actual loss, and the programs are quote-unquote payers of last resort, meaning victims must seek other avenues such as insurance first. Among the qualifications for these programs are that victims need to timely report their victimization and timely file an application. Let's apply your victim's rights knowledge to a few hypothetical scenarios. For the purposes of this exercise, a client visits your office to seek information and resources for an order of protection. You learn that the client was the victim of domestic violence perpetrated by their spouse, which prompted the client's visit. The client tells you they sought medical attention and reported the crime to the local police department, but heard from a system-based advocate that the prosecutor will not press charges. The client tells you they reported the crime to local law enforcement and they were assigned a system-based advocate. They have requested to review the police report in which their statement was documented on multiple occasions, both from the responding officer and the prosecutor's office. Several weeks have passed without a response. Which victim's rights might be at issue? Now, the client informed you that they sought medical attention for the injuries they suffered as a result of the domestic violence they reported. They're nervous because they recently received a subpoena for their medical records filed by the defense attorney. Which victim's rights might be at issue? The victim still has received no news about the case, so they contact law enforcement to inquire about the status of the investigation. The victim is surprised to learn that the defendant had already been arrested and released. Which victim's rights might be at issue? The client brings a box of receipts to your office and indicates that they have been paying out of pocket for therapy since the domestic violence incident occurred. But they are delinquent because they are still paying their medical bills from the hospital and they have missed work a lot because of the legal case. Which victim's rights might be at issue? How are you going to keep victims' rights issues in mind while you interact with your clients? Thank you for participating with this victims' rights issue spotting interactive video. For more resources, please visit ncvli.org.